Beyond their easternmost border near the Black Sea, there lived a nation of bloodthirsty female warriors known as the Amazons. In an era when it was presumed only men waged war, these women rode like the wind and fought like she-devils. They were rumored to have cut off their right breasts to better aim their arrows. They permitted no men to live among them. Only those women who had killed a man in battle were allowed to mate with neighboring tribes. The boys they bore were abandoned or killed. But the girls they raised and trained in the art of war. These murderous women were said to captivate the Greek men unlucky enough to cross their path. For despite their savage reputation, they were often described as beautiful, graceful, and blonde. But did the Amazons actually exist? And if so, what became of them? For centuries, researchers who sought proof of their culture did so in vain. But today, new archaeological evidence has surfaced to suggest that this enduring legend can no longer be dismissed as pure fantasy and may well be based in fact. One woman has pieced together a remarkable theory as to who the Amazons were and where their descendants live today. Her journey takes her to a mysterious burial site in Russia, where she and her colleague make a serendipitous discovery.
Can you give me an age?
Then to nomadic settlements in Mongolia, searching for a modern link to the female warriors of the past. And to a genetic lab in Germany, where a landmark DNA test could finally solve the mystery of the Amazon warrior women. Prakrovka, the steppes of southern Russia. In the 4th century BC, nomad warriors known as the Sarmatians ruled these plains. The steppes are dotted with kurgans, burial mounds to which they returned each summer to bury their dead. American archaeologist Janine Davis Kimball and her Russian colleague Leonid Yablonsky have been gathering evidence about these people's lives. The team has been sifting through these ancient grounds for weeks in search of artifacts and remains. According to Davis Kimball, the nomads buried here are no ordinary people. 10 years spent excavating and studying their culture has led her to believe they have a direct connection to the Amazon myth. Grave robbers have looted the burials along the Russian steppes time and again. But Yablonsky's survey of the area confirms that this one has been spared.
We could tell that the burial was untouched because when the burial has been robbed, there'll be little bits and pieces of stuff. The bones are scattered all over, and it's really obvious that it has been robbed, looted, and everything is really disturbed. In this case, everything was just perfect.
With no hard evidence, most scientists have given up on ascribing truth to the Amazon myth. But not Davis Kimball.
The labor involved in making the pits.
She believes she is close to cracking a 2,500-year-old mystery. The kurgan they have discovered is already noteworthy in that it appears to house only a single body. The 6 empty holes surrounding the grave could be blind pits designed to divert thieves. But one thing is certain. A single grave indicates a person of significance is buried within. The occupant's special status is confirmed when the team uncovers its first artifact, an intact mirror. Davis Kimball knows from her study of nomadic cultures that this often indicates the crypt of a spiritual leader.
It has bronze handle. Oh, and leather.
Oh, and there's leather on the back.
But nothing has prepared them for their next discovery. Gold. Fragments of gold that have remained hidden in the ground for thousands of years. And dozens of gold beads, which Davis Kimball believes were once part of a ceremonial garment.
Those are all attached to the costume.
Such a find is extremely rare, even for a team as experienced as this one.
How does that feel?
It feels like metal.
To be able to record it at the time it's being done is a chance in a lifetime, because that just doesn't happen. As if somebody had planned this.
The team turns up more artifacts, such as this silver bowl, that further attest to the occupant's wealth and high standing. This stone alabastron may have been used by priests to store hallucinatory perfumes that would assist their forecasting of the future.
Egyptian alabaster.
Egyptian alabaster, for crying out loud.
The jar likely traveled more than 2,000 miles to get here. Hours into the excavation, the team still has no idea if the occupant is male or female. But that is about to change.
Oh, that's an earring, right?
Yeah.
An earring leaves little doubt that the body in the grave is a woman.
Oh, it's worth it. All those sleepless nights and everything, it's worth it.
But just who is buried here? Yablonsky carefully examines the skull, whose morphology provides him further evidence of the skeleton's gender.
The face.
Female.
Female and young.
Can you give me an age?
About 30.
About 30.
30, yeah.
Perfect age. Perfect age.
The skeleton's bones testify to a particular lifestyle.
That's a pretty heavy, hefty bone there. That's a good-sized one.
She was a horsewoman, you know.
Bow-legged. Her coccyx was fused together and her femurs are very bowed, so that indicates that she rode a lot. Was on horseback a lot of hours.
But was she a warrior?
I was getting a little bit excited and I thought, I don't know whether it could be a warrior priestess, but I'm certainly not going to let any expectations lead me astray.
With the skeleton now completely exposed, Davis Kimball has even more reason to be optimistic. The body was buried in the attack pose of a warrior. One leg straight, the other bent at the knee, a rare sign of power and influence.
This is extremely unusual. I've only seen it once or twice among the male warriors, and I've never seen it in a female burial before.
Then comes the most decisive evidence.
I can see this orangey brown thing down there, but I can't tell what it is because it's not in a shape that I can recognize, and I can't see it plain enough from up in the top.
Janine, it is yours, arrowheads.
You found an arrowhead? Oh, Lynn.
And it's an incredibly huge cache of arrowheads. It's 110 iron arrowheads or more.
This richly ordained grave holds the symbols of a priest and the weapons of a warrior.
I am so utterly amazed to think that there's arrowheads in there, because now we know that we've got a warrior priestess and there's no way of denying it.
Could Davis Kimball be looking at the remains of a true Amazon warrior? Ironically, it was not the Amazons that first brought her here.
I first went out there in 1985, and I was studying nomadic people and who they were and what was their role in the total cultural picture of the Eurasian steppes.
Davis Kimball traveled to the remotest regions of the planet to observe how these people lived.
I've always been extremely curious about other cultures. And the more I learned, the more that I had to go and explore a little further.
In 1991, she joined up with Leonid Yablonsky along the Russia-Kazakhstan border.
And he invited me out there to work, and my focus had just been to learn nomadic culture. I had no idea that we would ever stumble onto anything that differentiated men from women and made the women so unique in their culture.
On a sunny day in the summer of 1994, the two archaeologists stumbled onto something extraordinary. The remains of a nomadic warrior culture. Human skeletons buried with swords, daggers, and arrowheads. What's more, the morphology of several of the skeletons led them to conclude the warriors were women. The male graves only deepened the mystery.
In some of the burials, the men had no artifacts, even had a baby buried with them, which is quite the contrary, because none of the women had a child buried with them. I didn't know what it meant. I began to think there must be some secret here that hadn't unfolded yet.
The most intriguing find among the burials was a skeleton given the number 272. The skeleton, presumed to be female, was found with a bent arrowhead lying within it.
It apparently had gone in, hit a bone, deflected, bent the tip, and ended up in the body cavity.
The find suggested to Davis Kimball that these were women who fought and died in battle.
Even though we have many warriors and warrior women and men that were warriors and so forth, it's rare to find evidence of having been killed in battle. I think I can recall a couple of men in 150 or more skeletons and this one woman.
Her suspicions mounted when the skeletal remains dated back 2,500 years to a time when the legend of the Amazons spread like a scandal across ancient Greece. Were these the actual women behind the myth?
I thought about the Amazonian myths and began to wonder if there was some underlying current that connected the two.
Now, a decade later, Davis Kimball's discovery of a culture with female warriors can no longer be dismissed as an isolated event. Her latest find, a warrior priestess buried with gold and weapons 200 miles to the north and 200 years later than her earlier discoveries, suggests that this was an enduring society. Davis Kimball reasons that if the phenomenon of female warriors was indeed this widespread, it could well have inspired the Amazon myth.
This burial made all of this come alive. There were warrior women. Their statuses were extremely high. This just adds one more piece of very, very strong evidence to the theories that I had previously developed.
Come on, I want to give you a big hug. You did such a good job.
That's exactly what we were looking for. It's like the gods guided us there to do this work this particular time.
We've got the best burial since probably more than a half a century.
Yablonsky has been digging into Russia's past for 37 years. Nothing compares to what he has unearthed here.
Seems to me more than 1,000 burials are excavated. To this burial I will remember for all my life because it is really a great success for Russian archaeology and for me personally.
Although the priestess warrior is an extraordinary find, Davis Kimball considers it only the newest piece of an existing puzzle.
We really don't know what happened to the warrior women out on the steppes. We don't know whether they perished, whether they were wiped out by an enemy, or whether they simply faded away and were absorbed by other tribes.
To solve this mystery, Davis Kimball must turn to modern forensics.
The reason that the DNA is so important that I wanted to do it is because it would tell us something about these nomadic people that we don't know, that we would never be able to find out otherwise.
DNA analysis would not only verify the warrior's gender, but could also reveal their genetic code, allowing Davis Kimball to track down their modern descendants.
Good luck with your excavation now.
Thank you. I'll help.
Okay.
One skeleton's DNA is not enough to draw a scientifically significant conclusion. Davis Kimball needs multiple specimens. For these, she will turn to the hundreds of skeletons she and Yablonsky excavated in 1994. Leaving the burial site to Yablonsky and his team, she travels to Samara, southern Russia. No scientist has yet applied forensic techniques to determine the true story of the ancient warrior women. Genetic information hidden in brittle bones could turn out to be far more precious than gold found in a single burial. She has brought with her forensic anthropologist Joachim Berger from the University of Mainz in Germany. He will be entrusted with the delicate task of extracting viable DNA from the skeletons. The pair is greeted by Alexander Choloff, director of Samara University's anthropology lab.
Sasha, how are you? It's good to see you. This is my good friend, Dr. Berger from Germany.
Nice to meet you.
Sasha?
Yeah.
The scientists head to the lab's archive, where Choloff and his team have stored the 1994 remains.
Oh, wow, look at this.
Моя коллекция. А здесь сюрприз для вас. Это покровские материалы. То, что для вас.
This is their collection of bones and skeletons, including all of the material from Pokrovka, he says.
Oh, they're all here.
All here. I wonder what the quality is. That's really going to be interesting to find out.
Well, that's a question.
The condition of the crudely kept bones pose a challenge, but Berger is one of only a few scientists in the world who has secured genetic material from 2,500-year-old human remains.
So you would suggest this is a female?
Well, that's what we really want to find out, if this is a female, and I would like your opinion.
Well, the morphological traits of the skull tend to be more female than male, but I'm not 100% sure. To be 100% sure, actually, we would need a DNA analysis.
Berger will extract bone fragments from 15 of the hundreds of skeletons that have been archived, including that of the warrior woman found with a bent arrowhead within her body, skeleton 272. As he measures 272's femur, he notes that she is above average height for females of the period.
42.8.
This seems to confirm the Greeks' description of the Amazons as particularly tall. Of question here is not just the sex of these warriors. Berger knows critical information about their history lies hidden within their genetic code.
The DNA may also give us some information about where they came from, their ethnicity, and it might tell us where they went to. These would be really groundbreaking discoveries if we can do this.
Hoping that viable genetic material has survived deep within, Berger carefully saws into the femur. The slightest contamination from either scientist, a hair, a fingerprint, even a cough, will ruin the samples and corrupt the results.
What do you think of the quality of these samples?
Well, this actually, I'm very surprised. This stuff is 2,500 years old and really looks very fresh. And it smells even a lot, which is a sign that there's a lot of organic preserved. It's very surprisingly well preserved. Probably the best material I've seen ever.
Is that a fact?
Yeah.
Only a complete biochemical analysis in Berger's lab in Germany will tell whether the samples hold enough usable DNA to help Davis Kimball solve her case. She must wait 6 months for the results. With the forensics underway, Davis Kimball travels to Munich to seek evidence of a link between her latest discoveries and the portrayal of Amazons in the art and writings of ancient Greece.
I really wonder if there's some truth to those blonde and tall killer beauties.
Davis Kimball feels that the Amazons have an undeniable mystique that resonates even in modern society.
There's a sexual connotation, there's the conquest, there's the beauty, there's all of these things rolled up into one. And it's probably this fascination that men have for women who are very strong, who are capable of killing them, and at the same time they feel they must subjugate them.
At the Munich Antiquities Collection, Davis Kimball meets historian Vincenz Brinkmann. The museum houses one of the world's most important collections of ancient artifacts, including pieces from the first millennium BC that show how the Greek image of the Amazons evolved over time.
The most famous sculptors invented images of the Amazon.
Right.
Instead of a ferocious marauder, the Amazon represented in this sculpture from around 450 BC is portrayed as a sultry huntress, scantily dressed in a Greek soldier's undergarment. She may be a killer, but she's hardly dressed to kill.
She is half naked in addition.
Right.
So erotical aspects.
Right. So they had their television too.
Brinkmann shows Davis Kimball red figure pottery from 500 BC, depicting one of the most famous Amazon tales of all. It is a story that goes back to the earliest mention of Amazons in Greek literature, in Homer's Iliad, an epic poem about the mythical Trojan War. The pottery shows the Amazon queen Penthesilea in a deadly fight with the Greek hero Achilles. In the 10th and final year of the war, the Amazons have come to the aid of the Trojans in their fierce fight against the besieging Greeks. The ancient writers recount how Penthesilea, together with her troop of female warriors, readies herself for battle. Homer writes, "On her head she settled the bright helmet, overstreamed with a wild mane of golden glistening hairs. So stood she, lapped about with flaming mail, in semblance like the lightning." Upon routing the Greek forces, Penthesilea turns her sword on Achilles. She cries, "So shall ye learn what might wells up in the breast of Amazons. With my blood is mingled war." But Penthesilea is no match for the Greeks' greatest warrior. Angered by her pride, he slays the masked warrior without remorse. But when he removes her helmet, he is so moved by the beauty of his dying opponent that he falls madly in love with her.
It's a wonderful Greek tragedy, but there's absolutely no archaeological proof that we have any Amazons at Troy or any place in the Greek world there.
Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
Most scientists, including Davis Kimball, dismiss Homer's poem about the Trojan War as a work of fiction. For the first historical account of the Amazons' exploits, Davis Kimball turns to a collection of priceless documents from around 430 BC, written by Herodotus, a Greek often referred to as the father of history. In Herodotus's time, history was spun out of folklore, rumor, and religious belief, as well as hard facts. For a modern scientist like Davis Kimball, the trick is to distinguish what is real from what is not. According to Herodotus, after the Greeks defeated the Amazons at the Thermodon River, they took them prisoner aboard their ships. But the Amazons rose up and killed the Greek crew. Unable to sail, they found themselves hopelessly adrift. The waves carried the Amazons to the far eastern shores of the Black Sea, the territory of a fierce warrior culture called the Scythians. The surviving Amazons intermarried with the Scythian men, but Herodotus says they refused to live among the Scythian women, who they deemed too docile. Herodotus describes how the Amazons convinced their new husbands to follow them northeast across the steppes, where they formed a new tribe, the Sarmatians. Herodotus placed these descendants of the Amazons somewhere northeast of the Black Sea, what is now southern Russia.
The interesting thing is that this is the general region where we excavated the Sarmatians, and we did excavate warrior women.
Was Herodotus right to suggest the Amazons themselves gave rise to the Sarmatians? It is impossible to say whether he had real evidence of the Amazons' existence. Some scholars speculate that his only explanation for the bizarre practices of the Sarmatian women who fought alongside their men was to assign them special origins. But despite his embellishment of the nomad's pedigree, the majority of Herodotus's account coincides with what Davis Kimball has found in the excavations.
Herodotus lived on the North Black Sea coast, and we know from our artifacts at Pokrovka, some of these artifacts actually came from that region, so there had to have been trade back and forth. These traders would bring tales of these fighting women, women who shot bow and arrow, who could wield a sword, who were very strong and very dangerous.
Herodotus writes that when a person died, the tribe would carry the body back to the sacred burial grounds at their summer pastures. He tells of men and women fighting side by side in battle. Davis Kimball found both male and female warriors in the graves. Herodotus also attests to the sacrifice of horses belonging to those of higher rank. Accordingly, scientists have found horse bones in the kurgans. Today, these kurgans dot the grasslands of southern Russia. The very region where Davis Kimball excavated the warrior priestess. To test her notion that the nomads may have influenced the Amazon myth, Davis Kimball asks to see depictions of Amazons from an even later period. The garments they wear are no longer Greek, but they look familiar to Davis Kimball.
This is really, really exciting because the costumes here are very much like my colleagues have excavated in Russia, and it shows the very specific elements of the nomadic costume as the actual nomads wore it.
These Amazons are shown wearing soft leather riding boots, akin to those found in the nomad burials.
And then over here on this Amazon, she has the panther pelt. And in the burials, we actually excavate this representation of this animal that's in gold, and it's worn by the priestesses.
The pattern seen on the clothing of this Amazon matches that of a shield unearthed in another excavation.
This is really, really exciting because as the Greeks depict them here, these Amazons really reflect the mythology that Herodotus talks about of the relationship between the Greek and the nomadic world. It's like having an artist sitting here and drawing for us and telling us what was happening at that time.
To Davis Kimball, the women she unearthed from the Russian burials appear to have inspired the Amazon myth. But one question remains: what became of their descendants? These warrior women, as they were known to the ancient Greeks, have vanished. The world of the steppe nomads has vanished too. except for within remote pockets of land located thousands of miles east of the excavation sites in Mongolia. Davis Kimball's search for the lost culture of the Amazons has led her to this remote location.
It's only in the ancient burial grounds that we find information about the ancient nomads. Today there's only one existing tribe, the Kazakhs of Western Mongolia, that have a similar lifestyle. And I wonder if I'll really find some connection between them and the ancient warrior women.
But Davis Kimball wants to look for more than mere cultural connections.
The next step of research that I would like to do is to see if we can find the genetic traces of the ancient warrior women that lived on the steppes.
For Davis Kimball to explore whether a genetic link exists, she first needs Berger to extract DNA from the ancient remains. But the news from her colleague is hardly encouraging. For months, Berger's team has been analyzing the bone fragments of the warrior women, trying to identify and isolate their genetic code. Berger was confident he would find sufficient DNA when he first collected the samples in Samara. But now, his optimism is fading. The first skeleton they have tested has not produced enough DNA to reveal its genetic fingerprint. Davis Kimball must now rely on her own research in the field.
It was really disappointing to me when I found out that Dr. Berger and his team didn't get any material of good DNA from the first sample. We can only hope that there's going to be DNA in the other samples that he took. He has quite a few more. One never knows what's going to happen with this, and it's very old DNA. It goes back 2,500 years at least, so it gets really touchy whether we're going to be able to get good results or not.
The ancient steppe nomads endured a difficult life. Davis Kimball is about to face a more modern hardship. A Mongolian domestic flight.
They don't have any instrument to fly with, so they need to see the top of the mountains, which now have snow on them.
After hours of waiting, she heads for the western end of Mongolia. This is the provincial capital, a little town called Ulgi. Here, Davis Kimball hopes to see if remnants of the culture of ancient warrior women are still visible. For a demonstration, this group of archers left their office jobs, donned traditional Mongolian garb, and took up arms.
This is called a recurve bow, and it's a very ancient bow. It's the same kind of bow that our female warriors would have used. And it's a very strong bow. It can be shot for a long ways. It's the kind of bow that you'd want to attack an enemy with and hope they didn't come at you.
This is actual weaponry. virtually indistinguishable from that of the Amazon warriors as depicted by the Greeks. The similarities in the wardrobe carry over to the tiny details.
This type of seashell actually relates back to the ancient warrior women. The warrior priestesses would have seashells in their burials also. Although they don't realize it, it may have this long history of going back in time.
The history of these people has been preserved within a small, little-seen museum in Ulgi. The staff show what they have collected from nomad families. The clothing is marked by abstract animal motifs, which symbolize ancient spiritual powers. Even their shoes reflect this enduring tradition.
There we have it. Beautiful Kazakh boots going back for 2,000 or 3,000 years.
It all closely corresponds to the artifacts found in ancient kurgans. This tall pointed hat adorned with beads brings to mind the Greek depictions. And the gold beads Davis Kimball unearthed in the priestess warrior's grave. The picture starts to come together.
It's so exciting, so gratifying to be able to find the actual costumes, the pointed hats, and all of the elements to show that we have a continuous line of development over time.
Could the Kazakh nomads living here in the Altai Mountains of Mongolia be the descendants of the ancient woman warriors? Hoping that Berger will find sufficient DNA material, Davis Kimball goes in search of further evidence. She heads into the remote mountains to meet with people who still live the nomadic life, and whose ancestors might have been the inspiration for so many Amazon tales.
In the myth of the Amazons, they're the daughters of Ares, they're the killers, they're the women who cut off their breasts. They have such a peculiar kind of lifestyle that doesn't really sound real. I want to go and look at the nomadic women and see how this compares to what Herodotus says about the Amazons.
After a drive of several hours, they encounter a tribe of nomads camped in a summer pasture. The people of this region rarely get visitors, but they are always welcome. Inside a traditional yurt, they share a customary meal of cheese and milk. Davis Kimball makes her living piecing together the remnants of the past. But here she can plainly see evidence of the ancient culture she has been investigating for years.
When you walk through the door, it's the gateway to the ancient world, because you can see so many similarities in the yurt.
Many of the designs match those of artifacts found in the ancient burials in Russia. The Kazakhs clearly share a cultural connection with the ancient warrior women. Could a genetic one exist as well?
We've gathered a lot of information on our travels, and the one thing that we're missing, the real missing link, is the DNA.
Davis Kimball is eager to learn from Berger if he has successfully extracted sufficient DNA. His results could make or break her investigation.
Hi, Janine. How are you?
Oh, just fine, just fine. What information do you have for us on the DNA?
The data are excellent. One of the best cases I've ever come across.
Oh, that's really excellent news. I'm so pleased.
Despite the initial setback, most of the bone samples have turned out to be remarkably well preserved.
The good news is that all the warrior women are definitively female. So now we know for sure their sex.
Berger's results have confirmed what Davis Kimball suspected. She has found female warriors. Now that she finally has their DNA, she can set out to prove whether they share genetic information with the nomads. Could they be related? To find out, she will need to find the candidate among the Kazakhs who will most likely prove a match.
I knew from the excavations and ancient texts that the Sarmatians were European-type people. But then in the modern Kazakhs, they're more Mongoloid-looking, but occasionally we would find a blonde person, blue eyes, fair skin, even freckly kids I've seen. So it was a matter of tracing it down and finding out what was the basis of this.
It is only a theory, but a note from Berger encourages Davis Kimball to follow through with her quest.
According to Dr. Berger, let me tell you what he says. It's possible the European appearance could still be seen after thousands of years. If these people were the descendants, there would still be evidence in their genetic pool. And if you're lucky, you can track it down.
She heads deeper into the steppes to look for a person with more European features. A person who she thinks will have the best chance of sharing the ancient warrior's DNA.
The local people here have told me that there may be blonder children up higher in the more isolated areas.
In a country that lacks roads and detailed maps, pinpointing a nomad community becomes a chaotic adventure.
Look out that way. I thought that's the way we were going.
These people have adapted.
These are the gates to history.
Finally, at a spot near the Chinese border, Davis Kimball and her team encounter a nomad family living in relative isolation. They are setting up their yurt for the coming winter. Whether or not the Kazakh women are related to the ancient warriors, Davis Kimball recognizes their unique strength.
You must be strong, you must pull this family together, you must pull this clan together, you must keep them going, you must motivate them every single day, whether it's snowing, raining, freezing cold, and it's the woman's job to keep that group pulling together all the time.
And in this unlikely spot, Davis Kimball finds who she has been looking for. A blonde child. If Davis Kimball is right, this little girl could help solve a 2,500-year-old mystery. Her name is Miramgul. She is 9 years old and looks nothing like her siblings.
If you'll notice, her eyes are kind of hazily. They're not really the dark black eyes of the Mongol. Although her face is very Mongolish kind of like, so she's really a true admixture. Her blonde hair tells me that there's some throwback from the Caucasoids that lived up in this area. There's really a long, long line of history going down through that little girl. The fact that kind of appearance today is really astounding.
If an ancestral connection exists between Miramgul and the ancient warrior women, the DNA samples provided by her and her mother will confirm it. Generation after generation, mitochondrial DNA within a population remains virtually unchanged, making it a useful tool for forensic examinations. But DNA cannot indicate what the ancient female warriors looked like. While Davis Kimball waits for the cheek swabs to arrive at Berger's lab, experts in computer-generated facial reconstruction will give Davis Kimball's most intriguing find, skeleton 272, a human face. German federal police in Wiesbaden typically flesh out the faces of unidentified victims of modern-day violence. But their latest case takes them back 2,500 years. They apply facial details based on the features of 272's skull and its distinctive genetic profile. And when they have finished their reconstruction, the eyes of a warrior stare back at them. The result is not at all what Davis Kimball anticipated. The reconstruction of skeleton 272 is neither blonde like the Amazons of legend, nor does she reflect the facial features of the Kazakhs.
I was really very disappointed when I saw the reconstruction of the head of 272 based upon the skull, not because of the configuration, but I expected something that somebody that looked more Caucasoid, more European. And this woman doesn't look European, doesn't look Mongol, and the color of her hair and eyes is very dark, and I expected somebody blonde.
Davis Kimball's decision to select a blonde girl for DNA testing now appears misguided. But she still holds out hope for a match.
The phenotype of a person can change very rapidly. The color of the eyes and the skin and the hair within one generation can be completely different. So there still can be some genetic link between Miramgul and 272.
The comparison of Miramgul and her mother's DNA with that of skeleton 272 takes only a few days to complete. The result surprises even an experienced expert like Joachim Berger. Against astonishing odds, the DNA of the ancient female warrior from Russia and the little girl from Mongolia are a striking match.
It's almost unbelievable what we found. The DNA sequences of the warrior woman and those from the girl of Mongolia are identical. This is a little bit like hitting the jackpot, because it means they share a common ancestor, and this again means they're related not only culturally, but also genetically.
In the remote steppe regions of western Mongolia lies the answer to an age-old mystery. Miramgul is directly related to a female warrior who roamed the Russian plains 2,500 years ago.
After 20 years of research in archaeology and traveling through very remote areas in western Mongolia, looking for the basis of the Amazonian myth. I think I've discovered the truth behind the myth. This is where the factual reality really lies, is with the nomadic people.
The blood of a warrior flows through the veins of a blonde girl named Miramgul.
Even for a scientist, it's a moving moment to see this girl racing down the steppes as a reenactment of the ancient nomads, of the warrior women of the past.
Janine Davis Kimball has uncovered a grain of truth, obscured for centuries by a powerful legend. A culture of warrior women did exist. And a part of them still lives on.
It's almost unbelievable. It's like you write a novel and things come out fine in a novel. In real life, they never come out that good, but this time they did.